Los Zetas is a powerful and violent criminal syndicate in Mexico, and is considered by the U.S. government to be the most technologically advanced, sophisticated, and dangerous cartel operating in Mexico. The origins of Los Zetas date back to the late 1990s when commandos of the Mexican Army's forces deserted their ranks and decided to work as the armed wing of the Gulf Cartel, a drug trafficking organization. In February 2010, Los Zetas broke away from their former employer and formed their own criminal organization. Los Zetas are well armed and equipped, and unlike other traditional criminal organizations in Mexico, drug trafficking makes up at least 50% of their revenue, while a large portion of the income comes from other activities directed against both rival drug cartels and civilians. Their brutal tactics, which include beheadings, torture and indiscriminate slaughter, show that they often prefer brutality over bribery. Los Zetas are also Mexico's largest drug cartel in terms of geographical presence, overtaking its rivals, the Sinaloa Cartel. Los Zetas also operate through protection rackets, assassinations, extortion, kidnappings, and other criminal activities. The organization is based in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, directly across the border from Laredo, Texas. History, etymology. The group's name Los Zetas is given after its first commander, Arturo Guzmán Endesina, whose federal judicial police radio code was Z1, a code given to high-ranking officers. The radio code for commanding federal judicial police officers in MA copyright Zika was Y, and are nicknamed Yankees. For federal judicial police in charge of a city the radio code was Z, and thus they were nicknamed as the letter in Spanish, Zetas. Foundation. After Osielcar Adenas Gila Copyright N took full control of the Gulf Cartel in 1999, he found himself in a violent turf war. In order to keep his organization and leadership, Cardenas sought out Ruben Salinas alias El Chato, a retired Army lieutenant who lured more than 30 Army deserters of the Mexican Army's elite Grupo Aroma Cubed Vildefights as specials to become his personal bodyguards, and later, as his mercenary wing. These Army deserters were enticed with salaries much higher than those of the Mexican Army. Cardenas' goal was to protect himself from rival drug cartels and from the Mexican military. Some of the original members, who had come from the GAFE unit, had during the 1990s reportedly received training in commando and urban warfare from Israeli Special Forces units and American Special Forces units, which included training in rapid deployment, marksmanship, ambushes, counter-surveillance and intimidation. Once Osielcar Adenas Guillen consolidated his position and supremacy, he expanded the responsibilities of Los Zetas, and as years passed, they became much more important for the Gulf Cartel. The Zetas began to organize kidnappings, protection rackets, extortion, securing cocaine supply and trafficking routes known as plazas and executing its foes, often with barbaric savagery. Guzmán Endesina was killed by members of the Mexican military on November 2002 in a restaurant in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, allowing Heriberto Lizano to take control of the paramilitary group. In response to the rising power of the Gulf Cartel, the rival Sinaloa Cartel established a heavily armed, well-trained enforcer group known as Los Negros. The group operated similarly to Los Zetas, but with less complexity and success. Upon the arrest of the Gulf Cartel boss Osielcar Adenas Guillen in March 2003 and his extradition in 2007, the Zetas took a more active leadership role within the Gulf Cartel and their influence grew greater within the organization. In 2010, however, Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel broke apart. Their operatives now include corrupt former federal, state, and local police officers, as well as former U.S. Army soldiers and ex-Caribbeals, the special forces of the Guatemalan military. Original members. Some of the original members are Arturo Guzmán Endesina, Heriberto Lizano, Carlos Vera Cava, Jesus Enrique Rejacuben Aguilar, Galdino Melado Cruz, Flavio Mar Copyright Santiago, Jaime González Jurien, Roger Leo González Paiza plus or minus a, Efraín Teodoro Torres, Raúl Hernández Barra Cubden, Varkta Nazario Castrejacubden P plus or minus a, Gustavo González Castro, Oscar Guerrero Silva, Alberto Trillo Benavides, Luis Alberto Guerrero Reyes, Mateo da Aus La Cubed Pez, Daniel Pera Copyright Z Rojas, Luis Reyes Enriquez, Naba Vargas Garca. A. Isidro Lara Flores, Alfonso Lechuga Licona, Ernesto Zetara Enbilis, Prisciliano Ibarra Ubis, Roger Leo Guerra Ramirez, Miguel Angel Soto Parra, Gonzalo Girazano Escribano, Daniel Enrique Maya Quez Aguilar, Ivar Envila Zquez Caballero, Raul Lucio Hernandez Lechuga, Enrique Ruiz Tlapanco, Braulio Arellano Dormanuez, Jorge La Cubed Pez, Jose Copyright Rama Cubed en Davila, Eduardo Estrada Gonzalez, Omar La Mendes Patala, Eduardo Salvador La Cubed Pez Lara, and Germa N. Torres Gima Copyright Nez. Over time, many of the original 31 have been killed or arrested, and a number of younger men have filled the vacuum, forming something that resembles what Los Zetas used to be, but still far from the efficiency of the original, elite military background. Split from the Gulf Cartel, it is unclear which of the two the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas started the conflict that led to their breakup. It is clear, however, that after the capture and extradition of Cardenas, Los Zetas had become so powerful that they outnumbered and outclassed the Gulf Cartel in revenue, membership, and influence. Some sources reveal that as a result of the supremacy of Los Zetas, the cartel felt threatened by its own enforcers and decided to curtail their influence, but ended up instigating a civil war. In addition, from the perspective presented by the cartel, the narco banners placed by them in the cities of Matamoros and Reynosa explained that the reason for their rupture was that Los Zetas had expanded their operations not only to drug trafficking, but also to extortion, kidnapping, homicide, and theft, actions that the cartel allegedly disagreed with. Los Zetas countered the accusations by posting their own banners throughout Tamaulipas, noting that they had carried out executions and kidnappings under orders of the cartel and they were originally created for that sole purpose. In addition, Los Zetas charged that the cartel also kills innocent civilians, and then blames the Zetas for their atrocities. Other sources have claimed that Antonio Cardenas Gila Copyright N., brother of Cardenas and one of the successors of the Gulf Cartel, was addicted to gambling, sex, and drugs, leading Los Zetas to perceive his leadership style as a threat to the organization. Other reports mention, however, that the divide occurred due to a disagreement on who would take on the leadership of the cartel after the extradition of Cardenas. The candidates from the cartel were Antonio Cardenas Gila Copyright N and Jorge Eduardo Costilazar Nchez, while Los Zetas wanted the leadership of their then head, Heriberto Lizano. Some sources mention that the cartel began looking to form a truce with their Sinaloa Cartel rivals, and Los Zetas did not want to recognize the treaty settlement. Other sources suggest that Los Zetas separated from the Gulf Cartel to form an alliance with Beltran-Leyva Cartel, which led to conflict with the Gulf Cartel. Other sources mention that what initiated the conflict between them was when Samuel Flores Borrego, a lieutenant of the Gulf Cartel, killed Sergio P. ± Mendoza, alias El Concord III, a lieutenant of Los Zetas, due to a disagreement over the drug corridor of Reynosa, whom both protected. Soon after his death, Los Zetas demanded that the Gulf Cartel hand over the killer. They refused, triggering the war. When the hostilities began, the Gulf Cartel joined forces with its former rivals, the Sinaloa Cartel and La Familia Michoacana, aiming to take out Los Zetas. Consequently, Los Zetas allied with the Juarez Cartel, the Beltran-Leyva Cartel, and the Tijuana Cartel. Los Zetas in fighting. In a flurry of articles in late August 2012, a U.S. law enforcement official told the press that Miguel Trivia ± Morales, the former second-in-command of Los Zetas, had successfully taken the leadership of the cartel and displaced Heriberto Lizano, the longtime leader. Due to his violent and confrontational personality, Trivia ± Morales began to take over the assets of Los Zetas and replaced Lizano as the head in early 2010. At the beginning, Lozano was happy to have a man like Trevia plus or minus O Morales in his ranks, but he reportedly underestimated him and gave him too much power. The active role of Trevia plus or minus O Morales gained him the loyalty and respect of many in Los Zetas, and eventually many stopped paying Lozano. Personality-wise, Trevia plus or minus O Morales and Lozano are opposing figures. Trevia plus or minus O Morales tends to prefer violence, while Lozano is a lot steadier, and prefers to keep his organization as a stable group. Lozano reportedly wants Los Zetas to be less of a problem for the next political administration of Enrique P. plus or minus Neto. In contrast, Trevia plus or minus O Morales is someone who wants to fight the fight. Los Zetas are inherently an unstable organized crime group with a long history of brutal violence, and with the possibility of more if the infighting continues and if they fight off without a central command. Attacks. Los Zetas have also carried out multiple massacres and attacks on civilians and rival cartels, such as the 2008 Moralaya grenade attacks, where 8 were killed and over 100 were injured. The 2010 San Fernando Massacre, where 72 migrants were found dead. The 2011 San Fernando Massacre, where 193 people were killed. The massacre of 27 farmers in Guatemala. The 2011 Monterrey casino attack, where 52 people were killed. The Altamira prison brawl, where 31 Gulf Cartel inmates were killed. The Apataca prison riot, where 44 Gulf Cartel inmates were killed and 37 Zetas escaped from prison. In addition, sources reveal that Los Zetas may also be responsible for the 2010 Puebla oil pipeline explosion, which killed 28 people, injured 52, and damaged over 115 homes. The 2011 massacre at Allende, Coahuila, where an estimated 300 to 500 civilians were killed after the Zetas accused two local men of betraying the organization. Current status: by 2011 only 10 of the original 34 Zetas remained fugitives. And to this day most of them have either been killed or captured by the Mexican law enforcement and military forces. As of 2012, Los Zetas had control over 11 states in Mexico, making it the drug cartel with the largest territory in the country. Their rivals, the Sinaloa Cartel, have lost some territories to Los Zetas, and went down from 23 states in Dominion to 16. By the beginning of 2012, Mexico's government escalated its offensive against the Zetas with the announcement that 5 new military bases will be installed in the group's primary areas of operation. On October 9, 2012, the Mexican Navy confirmed that Los Zetas leader Heriberto Lozano had been killed in a firefight with Mexican Marines in a state on the border with Texas. In a May 2013 interview with the International Crisis Group, researcher Daniel Herring stated, "The old networks were disrupted by the Zetas, and now the Zetas have disintegrated into Zetillas. They are splinter groups, not big operators." On July 14, 2013, it was reported that the Mexican Marine Corps captured the Zetas leader Miguel Angel Trevia plus or minus O Morales, also known as Z40 in Anahoc, Nuevo Laredo, near the border of Tamaulipas state. The authorities allege that he was succeeded by Omar Trevia plus or minus O Morales, his brother. On October 12, 2013, Mexican authorities captured alleged top Zetas operative Gerardo Jaramillo, alias El Yanqui. His arrest ultimately resulted in the discovery and seizure of a large Zetas weapons cache and supply stash, including assault rifles, several grenade launchers, magazine clips, 2,000 rounds of ammunition of various calibers, bulletproof vests and balaclavas. On May 9, 2014, one of the founding members, Galindo Melado Cruz, and 4 other armed men were killed in a shootout with Mexican security forces after they raided Cruz's hideout in the city of Reynosa. Tamaulipas state corruption, political corruption. The drug violence and political corruption that has plagued Tamaulipas, the home state of the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas, has fueled fears of it becoming a failed state, and a haven for drug traffickers and criminals. The massacre of 72 migrants and the discovery of mass graves in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, the assassination of the gubernatorial candidate Rodolfo Torcantor, the increasing violence between cartels, and the state's inability to ensure safety have led some analysts to conclude that neither the regional nor federal government have control over the territory of Tamaulipas. Although drug-related violence had existed long before the Mexican drug war, it often happened in low-profile levels, with the government looking the other way in exchange for bribes while drug traffickers went about their business as long as there was no violence. During the 71-year rule of the Institutional Revolutionary Party, the Mexican government would conduct customary arrests and allow cartel business to continue. After the PRI lost power to the National Action Party in the 2000 presidential election, all the agreements between the previous government and the cartels were lost along with a Pax Mafiosa. Tamaulipas was no exception. According to PAN politician Santiago Creel, the PRI in Tamaulipas had been protecting the Gulf Zeta organization for years. The PAN has claimed that government elections in Tamaulipas are likely to encounter an organized crime influence. In addition, there are formal charges that three former governors of Tamaulipas Manuel Cavazos Lerma, Thomas Yarrington, and Eugenio Hernandez Flores have had close ties with the Gulf Zeta organization. On January 30, 2012, the Attorney General of Mexico issued a communique copyright ordering the governors and their families to remain in the country as they are being investigated for possible collaboration with cartels. In 2012, Yarrington was further accused of money laundering for Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel. In Tampico, Tamaulipas, Mariscal Par copyright Rez Inquanzo was arrested on November 12, 2011 due to his improper exercise of public functions and forgery of certain documents. In mid-2010, both Flores and the mayor of Reynosa, Ascalio but Gusha copyright RREZ both members of the PRI were criticized for claiming that there were no armed confrontations in Tamaulipas and that the widespread violence was only a rumor. Months later, Flores finally acknowledged that several parts of Tamaulipas were being overrun by organized crime violence. Gusha copywriter REZ later recognized the work of the federal troops and acknowledged that his city was experiencing an escalation in violence. Prison breaks. On March 25, 2010, 40 inmates escaped from a federal prison in the city of Matamoros, Tamaulipas. On April 5, 2010, at a prison in the border city of Reynosa, a convoy of 10 trucks packed with gunmen entered the prison grounds without resistance, broke into the cells, and liberated 13 extremely dangerous inmates. 85 inmates escaped from the same Reynosa prison 6 months later. In Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas on December 17, 2010, 141 inmates escaped from a federal prison. The federal government condemned the mass prison break and stated that the work by the state and municipal authorities of Tamaulipas lack effective control measures, and urged them to strengthen their institutions. A confrontation inside a maximum security prison in Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas on July 15, 2011 left 7 inmates dead and 59 escaped. 5 on-duty guards have not been found. The Tamaulipas governor then recognized his inability to secure federal prisoners and prisons. Consequently, the federal government assigned the Mexican Army and the federal police to guard some prisons until further notice. They were also left in charge of searching for the fugitives. It has been reported that more than 400 prison inmates escaped from several Tamaulipas prisons from January 2010 to March 2011 due to corruption. On September 17, 2012 in Piedras Negras, Coahuila, more than 130 inmates from Los Zetas organized a massive prison break in broad daylight by walking directly from the front gate to several trucks outside the prison. Police corruption. Reports indicate that Tamaulipas police forces are the worst paid in Mexico despite being one of the states hardest hit by violence. The reports also indicate that in Aguascalientes, a state where violence levels are much lower, policemen are paid 5 times more than in Tamaulipas. As a result, most of the police forces in Tamaulipas are believed to be susceptible to corruption due to their low wages, and the presence of organized crime, who can easily bribe them. The National Public Security System has condemned the low police salaries, and demanded that state and municipal authorities create better paying programs for policemen so they can have a fair wage for themselves and their families. Although the joint Operation Nuevo Laredo en Tamaulipas issued in 2007, along with several other military-led operations by the federal government, have brought thousands of troops to restore order in Tamaulipas, on May 9, 2011, Mexican Federal Police, along with the Mexican Army, disarmed all police forces in the state of Tamaulipas, beginning with the cities of Matamoros and Reynosa. In June 2011, the Tamaulipas state government asked the federal government to send in troops to combat the drug cartels in the area, in order to consolidate actions on public safety, and strengthen the capacity of their institutions. News reports indicate that the troops could only replace half of the policemen in the state. Consequently, the federal government is currently building 3 military bases in Tamaulipas, in Ciudad Mía, San Fernando, and Ciudad Manti. On November 7, 2011, about 1,650 policemen were released from their duties because they had either failed corruption control tests or refused to take them. Organizational structure: Los Zetas have set up camps to train recruit as well as corrupt ex-federal, state, and local police officers. In September 2005, testimony to the Mexican Congress from the then Defense Secretary Clement Vega indicated that the Zetas had also hired at least 30 former cartels from Guatemala to train new recruits because the number of former Mexican Special Forces men in their ranks had shrunk. Los Zetas training locations have been identified as having a similar setup as military GAFE training facilities. It is also known that they have hired former U.S. Army soldiers for weapons smuggling, drug trafficking, and at least one as a hitman. Los Zetas members may also possess a Los Zetas Commando medallion for their service to the organization. Territory: Analysts indicate that the Zetas are the largest organized crime group in Mexico in terms of geographical presence. Los Zetas are primarily based in the border region of Nuevo Laredo and Coahuila, with hundreds more throughout the country. They have placed lookouts at arrival destinations such as airports, bus stations, and main roads. In addition to conducting criminal activities along the border, they operate throughout the Gulf of Mexico, in the southern states of Tabasco, Yucatán, Quintana Roo, and Chiapas, and in the Pacific Coast states of Guerrero, Oaxaca, and Michoacán, as well as in Mexico City. They are also active in several states in the United States. The cartel also has important areas of operation in Guatemala, where their operations are reported to have begun as early as 2008. They are active in Texas, other U.S. states, and in Italy within Drinta. Early in 2012 it was reported that Los Zetas are operating in the northern Venezuela-Colombia border, and have teamed up with the Colombian outfit called Los Rastrojos. Together they control the drug trafficking routes in the Colombian La Guajira and the Venezuelan state of Zulia. Colombia is the producing country and Venezuela is the main port route toward the US and Europe. Alliances and rivalries: indications of the broken alliance between the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas began in September 2009. On February 24, 2010, gunmen board hundreds of trucks marked CDG, XXX, and M3, clashed with Zetas gunmen in the northern cities of Tamaulipas. The clash between these two groups started in Reynosa, and then expanded to Nuevo Laredo and Matamoros. The war then spread out through 11 municipalities of Tamaulipas, 9 of them bordering the U.S. state of Texas. Soon, the war reached Tamaulipas' neighboring states of Nuevo Laredo and Veracruz. Their conflict also spread to U.S. soil, where Gulf Cartel hitmen killed 2 Zeta members in Brownsville, Texas on October 5, 2010. Confrontations between these two groups temporarily paralyzed entire cities in broad daylight. Several witnesses claimed that many of the municipalities throughout Tamaulipas were war zones, and that many businesses and houses were burned down, leaving areas in total destruction. In the midst of violence and panic, Mexican local authorities and mass media tried to minimize the situation and claimed that nothing was occurring, but the facts were impossible to cover up. For many years, there were long-fought battles between the Gulf Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel, that eventually lead the two to re-evaluate the situation and decide whether or not this combat was in either organization's best interests. The complexity and territorial advantage of Los Zetas forced the Gulf Cartel to seek an alliance with the Sinaloa Cartel and, La Familia Cartel. Consequently, Los Zetas joined forces with the Beltran-Leyva Cartel as well as the Juarez Cartel and Tijuana Cartel or Arellano Flies organization, to counteract the alliance of the Gulf Cartel, Sinaloa Cartel and La Familia Michoacana cartels. Since February 2010, the major cartels have aligned in two factions, one formed by the Juarez Cartel, Tijuana Cartel, Los Zetas and the Beltran-Leyva Cartel. The other faction integrated by the Gulf Cartel, Sinaloa Cartel and La Familia Cartel. United States. In a 2010 report, it was noted that the American street gang, Soraya ±Os, maintains ties with the Los Zetas cartel in California and South Carolina. A recent report from the FBI shows U.S. street gangs growing closer with Mexican cartels. Within the United States, Los Zetas are using social media as a method of communication between the two countries and are also using the sites as a method of recruiting young aspiring members who in their perception see the actions of the cartel as glorified and are able to ask how they can join. In addition, Soraya ±Os share connections with Los Zetas, as do the gangs Mis-13, Mexican Mafia, and Latin Kings. Law enforcement raids. Following a bilateral law enforcement investigation named Operation Blackjack, executed by the ATF, ICE and the FBI, 3 Zeta safe houses were identified in Mexico and raided by Mexican federal security forces, releasing more than 40 kidnapped individuals, and making the largest weapons seizure in the history of Mexico. It included 540 rifles including 288 assault rifles and several .50 caliber rifles, 287 hand grenades, 2 M72 LAW anti-tank weapons, 500,000 rounds of ammunition, 67 ballistic vests and 14 sticks of dynamite. In October 2008, the FBI warned that a Zeta cell in Texas would engage law enforcement with a full tactical response, should law enforcement attempt to intervene in their operations. The cell leader was identified as Jaime Gonzalez Jurien, who was later arrested on November 7, 2008, in the border city Reynosa, Tamaulipas. In February 2009, Texas Governor Rick Perry announced a program called Operation Border Star Contingency Plan to safeguard the border if Zetas carry out their threats to attack U.S. security officers. This project includes the use of tanks, airplanes and the National Guard as a preventive measure upon the possible collapse of the Mexican state to protect the border from a Zetas attack and receive an eventual exodus of Mexicans fleeing from the violence. In 2012 the Obama administration imposed sanctions on Los Zetas as one of 4 key transnational organized crime groups, along with the Brothers Circle from Russia, the Yamaguchi-gumi from Japan, and the Camorra from Italy. Also in 2012, the United States posted a $5 million reward for information leading to the successful capture of Miguel Trevino ±O Morales. Trevino Morales is known in Los Zetas as Z40. On June 12, 2012, Z40, and 2 of his brothers were arrested and indicted on charges in the state of Texas after raids and dozens of arrests in New Mexico, Texas and Oklahoma. There is a great lack of funding being sent to Mexico by the United States to combat Los Zetas, although they address Mexico and the media as their biggest concern. The MAR Copyright Rider initiative that was put in place by the Bush administration in the United States, suggested that $1.4 billion in funds was to be sent to Mexico over a 3-year period, in order to combat narco-trafficking from the U.S.-Mexico border to Panama, but few of these funds have yet to be received in Mexico. In addition, the current Obama administration seems to be making a very modest effort by way of support for the struggling country, although a former drug czar Barry McCaffrey told Congress that Merida was a drop in the bucket, unregistered trademark and that the United States a unregistered trademark cannot afford to have a narco state as their neighbor unregistered trademark thus far. Of the resources promised by the United States government regarding Mexico and their ongoing drug combat, little has been received. Anonymous Operation Cartel, the operation to expose information of people who work with Los Zetas, dubbed Operation Cartel, was reportedly started as a result of an anonymous member being kidnapped during Operation Paperstorm in Veracruz, a once peaceful city. The New York Times mentioned that Los Zetas has access to sophisticated tracking software due to the fact that they have infiltrated Mexican law enforcement agencies, and that online anonymity might not be enough protection for Internet users. See also: illegal drug trade, MAR Copyright Rider Initiative, War on Drugs, list of Mexico's 37 most wanted drug lords, references. External links: Diabert, Michael. Cartel Wars. Truthdig.com. Zetas, Insight Crime, The Evolution of Los Zetas, a Mexican crime organization. Narconews.com. Zetas burn media's script in War on Drugs. FBI Assistant Director's statement to the U.S. House of Representatives on Zetas, Equine Crime, a horse farm of a different color, ex-troops aiding drug traffickers. Washington Times. 2005.